And why doesn't an obscene military budget, unprecedented amounts of money being spent on the military, why doesn't that produce stable jobs?
Well, in the first part, it's the structure of the military-industrial complex itself. Recently, Hollywood opened a new studio employing about 20 people in the shell of what had once been one of the largest employers in California, Douglas Aircraft in Long Beach. The military-industrial sector is still fabulously wealthy, but it creates probably as many blue-collar jobs overseas as it does in the United States, and hardly on the scale that it once did. Moreover, military spending is already so large that unless you were willing to allow deficit, federal spending to grow to World War II type levels, you can't accomplish both goals. And again, it has partially to do with the new international constraints on the American economy. Everything that President Obama and the Democrats attempt to do in Washington over the next year or 2 years is subject to the scrutiny of our creditors, of Japan, China, and the Middle East. And we no longer have the kind of freedom to just, print dollars and raise deficits. And I'm not sure that, most Americans really understand the limits that have been placed on the ability of the government to act in terms of expanding demand or creating jobs.
Well, with all this, with the economy apparently in some kind of free fall, credit markets and real estate and financial banking, have you been reassured at all by what Barack Obama has said about the crisis and about his prescriptions for how to get out of it?
No, not at all. I mean, I think that this campaign is a landmark in the sense that unprecedented numbers of ordinary Americans are choosing economic solidarity over racial division. And that's an enormously important thing. But this is a campaign that, in terms of its content and its program, is immensely impoverished, which avoids, many of the most important issues, like immigration, that talks in the most fuzzy, often meaningless terms about the crisis. I mean, where have we seen, the Democrats outraged by the fact that the bailout bill they voted for, in fact, is, we now know it's not largely going to increase credit, make loans available, but it's paying off dividends to shareholders and being used to, further concentrate the bank system. Not a day goes by that there's, some new populist outrage, but the campaigns are pre-programmed to, avoid these really difficult issues. And I think progressive Americans, most Americans, we now belong to a cargo cult where we know that the Democratic platform is totally inadequate to the task, but we believe somewhere inside the candidate, is a great man, is another FDR. The problem is, even if Barack Obama is FDR, even if he has the moral stature of Lincoln, he doesn't have the intellectual or political resources to bring about substantial change. Those have to be created outside the political process. Those have to be created in the streets and workplaces by social struggle. I mean, the only reason the New Deal happened is because of the immense uprising of American workers in the 1930s, who then empowered the ideas of progressives on the periphery of the White House. Unfortunately, we're in a situation where most of the movements in this country, most of the people's organizations have been completely absorbed into the campaign and into Democratic politics. And the key question after January is, will we go back to the work of organizing? Will we, light fires under Washington? That's, I think, the most urgent question.
Mike Davis, acclaimed educator, historian, and writer, author of books like In Praise of Barbarians, Essays Against Empire, published by Haymarket Books, City of Quartz, and Ecology of Fear. We'll take a short break and ask him about what he calls star-spangled fascism. We'll also talk about anti-immigrant, not just sentiment, but activity. And also, he's written a very interesting piece on climate change and the politics of it. Please stay with us. And this is Against the Grain on Pacifica Radio and online at kpfa.org. The associate producer is H.N. Ewan. My name is C.S. Song. It's always delightful and enlightening to have Mike Davis join us on Against the Grain. He writes about so many different things, and really, if you've never picked up a book or read an article by Mike Davis, it's really worth it, not just for his insights, but for his language. He writes in a very spirited style, let me put it that way. It's very readable, and he's able to really convey a lot of information in just an accessible and in some ways, in sometimes just a delightful way. You might have read his book, City of Quartz. That's a classic. Ecology of Fear. That certainly is another seminal volume. Buddha's Wagon is more recent. Planet of Slums. I see citations to it everywhere these days. He wrote a book about avian flu called The Monster at Our Door. And he co-authored with Justin Akers-Chacon the book, No One is Illegal. You spoke just before the break, Mike, about how important organizing will be on the left, even if Obama becomes president, or perhaps especially when Obama becomes president. You also point to the specter of what you call star-spangled fascism, something that could rear its ugly head even if the right loses next week. What kind of fascism might be on the horizon?
Well, star-spangled fascism is Sinclair Lewis's phrase. He wrote a famous book, of course, in the late 30s called It Can Happen Here, warning that if fascism came to America, it would come in a distinctly American patriotic form. And my concern is that the organizing by the right is going to get off the blocks far more quickly and more powerfully than organizing from the left after the election. A deeply wounded conservative Republican base, which has already been, stirred by 4 or 5 years of intense nativist agitation, and now has a ready-made scapegoat, a kind of version of the Weimar stab-in-the-back theory that the crisis is due to, basically poor black people with Fannie Mae mortgages and, competition of immigrant workers or left-wing groups that have, padded the voter rolls with, illegal immigrants. I mean, this is already at such a level that I think, almost certain that immigrant bashing is going to become a kind of one-stop response of defeated parts of, the conservative base. And unfortunately, this has been aided and abetted at every step by the failure of Democrats, by the failure of Barack Obama to deal with the issue of immigration, the great missing issue in this. and to go along and make concessions to the ICE raids, to the further militarization of the border. And in some ways, I think the greatest priority for progressives in the immediate aftermath of the election is committed to struggle to support immigrant rights.